Yali Meret, today is Tuesday, October 6, 2020 at 8 p.m. Our topic this evening is the Illuminated Heart, from Physical to Mystical, Part 1 of 3. What role does the heart play in the totality of human expression, from its physical experience to spiritual consciousness? In this three-part series, we will explore multiple dimensions, including the language of the heart and its transformation from the outer to the inner heart, leading to mystical ecstasy.
Tonight, we will be having our Holy Ganan recited by Shamneez Pirani. Shamneez, if I could please have you join us with audio and video to begin the recitation of the Ganan. Thank you, Shamneez.
Jire vira michidu ahi bulu viranami kami ho yare cha loki vira viranami kami ho yare chalo mat chodiyo sat dharam suniha hoji jire vira jivaro akashi Tinjo pindi yo payare ki tinjo pindi yo payara ito doyari ho tinka kamala suneha hoji jire vira mo mana teche moman truti ho yar sa deki moman truti ho yar sa de ito sargi ho jayashi teno jiva hoji jire vira naraji pire sadi pire shamash ho yar bolya ki pire shamash ho yar bolya ito jibri ho pindere sagpan kaisa hoji
Thank you so much, Shamneez. That was a beautiful recitation. So appreciate your taking that on. I would now like to pass it over to Dr. H, who will do an intro and then begin his session. Thank you, everyone. Dr. H.
Yali Madat, everyone. Thank you, Shairoz. Thank you to all the other co-hosts this evening who are managing the site. And thank you to all the participants. So I'd like to begin by making some introductory remark. As you know, this session on the illuminated heart is going to be in 3 parts, and such is the intensity of what this topic is all about. And inshallah, with Maula's blessing, I will try to share as much as I can. But I also would like to tell the participant, I'm in no rush, because one of the feedback that I always receive is that because the session tends to go way beyond an hour and a half or so, and there may be too much information to take in, of course, and that is one of the challenges that we have. And of course, for many people in the who are awake much later because of the time, they have even a greater challenge. So I'm going to kind of take my time in the flow of the information so that eventually things connect properly and you have an ability to have time and the ability to internalize and absorb the information. And please do note down your questions, on your side, and later on when you have the time, you can send them as Shairoz explained in the announcement, how to send your questions. This particular Ginan, first of all, congratulations to Shamnis. This is a very difficult Ginan. You truly require a blessed voice to be able to say this Ginan, but it touched the heart, no pun intended, but truly so. It did touch the heart. And this Ginan is such that you will see in my remark what I mean by it touch the heart. So let me say a few words about the Ginan itself as we are making a transition into the topic about the illuminated heart. In this Ginan, Holy Pir Shams Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says that it says to the believers, to the faithful, speak sweetly or kindly here and now. The Pir Shams says, live with humility and patience. And he says, oh friends, never abandon the love for the true faith and the true religion. So you can see these elements of friendship, humility, patience, and remaining steadfast on the faith is the message in the first part. In the second part that was recited by Shamnis, the Holy Pir speaks about where does the soul belong? And he says the soul is one that belongs into the spiritual realm, the celestial realm. And the body is made of earthly elements, and it is a temporary vehicle simply moving and floating into this material plane, just like when you have a lotus plant in the water that simply floats. The third part of this Ginan emphasizes that a mu'min, a believer, a follower of the Imam, is always in quest of making things better, of fixing things if they are not right. And a faithful or a believer who has this quality, which is that quality, the quality of always self-examination and making things right, because the believer realizes, of course, we are not perfect, but he says, you know what, I need to correct this, I need to fix this, I need to improve that. This kind of attitude in life of constantly self-improvement for the sake of Mawla, because we seek always to be in harmony with what our beloved Imam guides us and teaches us, and seek to achieve that level of harmony and perfection, if you like. And the Holy Pir says, by doing that, surely this soul is going to go to heaven. What an amazing promise and declaration of the Holy Pir. And then the last part has to do with the blessings of the Imam, the Holy Pir says. And he says, what kind of relationship there is between, the Pir is asking the question rhetorically, say, have you thought of it? What kind of relationship there is between the body and the soul? So, and of course the Ginan has many more parts, but these are the ones that were recited. And based on these ginans and of course on others, which I will mention during the talk, have you ever wondered, and I have said this before, and I have posed this question before, and I said, have you ever wondered why we say these ginans? And I know that I have given a lot of information in the past, but today particularly because we are focusing on the heart. The ginans have a special relationship. And what is that relationship? Did you know, my dear brothers and sisters, as I've said before, the ginans, this amazing, wonderful spiritual tradition, it is composed and given to us by the holy peers. And remember, who are the holy peers? They are the highest in creation. And the Imam of the time himself is the 49th Imam and the 50th holy peer. And when the peer is, well, evidently, because the Imam is the Nur, so there is nothing higher than this. But the holy peer, who is the highest in creations, when they have composed this ginan and other ginans, one of the intent of the ginan, amongst others, was to ensure that we gain knowledge about the salvation of our soul. And in the context of that salvation giving message, the holy peers is very clear in all of our ginans to give recognition of the Imam of the time. In other words, recognizing the Imam of the time is one of the fundamental messages of the Quran, of the holy ginans. In addition to that, when the believer recites the ginan, guess what happens? The ginans, because they are composed by those who bears the Nur of Nabuwat, when the ginans are recited, when you participate in the ginans, when you willfully exercise your wish and your will to be part of the ginan, and you say, I'm going to recite and learn this ginan and learn its meaning. In other words, there is an intent at the back of your mind. Guess what happens when you recite the ginan? The ginans will awaken your heart. Now you might say, what is that? You know, by and large, the human heart is asleep. It is asleep in a sense that you know you have a heart, but you know, the heart is perhaps, well, I should say maybe definitely, the most misperceived organ that we have in the body. I'll come to that in a second. But right here, I want to be able to share with you and say, because of the intent in the ginan by the holy peers, the ginan is the highest spiritual wisdom that is conveyed to the believers for the purpose of their salvation. And please remember one thing, my dear brothers and sisters, that the ginans were intended then and now, and certainly for the future, they were intended for the mu'mins. This wasn't intended for any other purpose. Yes, indeed, historically, when the holy peers came to the Indian subcontinent, they disclosed this message in order to show the connection to the people in the subcontinent. But what connection? The connection that is known as the first revelation, the first Vedantic and the final Quranic. It came together. So do not get confused when people make sometimes uninformed remarks. Do not forget The Holy Quran is a revelation from Allah. The Veda is a revelation from Allah. The Torah is a revelation from Allah. The Injil is a revelation from Allah. The Psalms of David is a revelation from Allah, the Zabur. It has come from one divine source. So it is sometimes worrying when people simply isolate the word Veda and they suddenly start to express their dismay that, oh, the Gnan is something that's coming from that particular form and source. No, the Gnan encompasses what has come from the very beginning of the revelation, the first Vedantic and the end Quranic, meaning the Quran being the last revelation. And the genius that our holy peers had. Now remember, the first Vedantic and the last Quranic came from the same source of revelation. Different language, different time, different civilization, different expression, different methodology, but they came together. And as a result of that understanding, we are able to trace within the corpus of the Gnan the knowledge of the heart that came all the way from the beginning and the end. And of course, now, after the final revelation of Allah to mankind, which is the Holy Quran, whatever came out of the Quran in its spiritual sense was given by the holy peers in the Gnan. So in the act of reciting the Gnan, the heart awakens. Why? Because in the Gnan there is Nur, and spiritual knowledge is Nur. It's an expression of the Nur. And reciting the Gnan, when we do it in Jumat Khana, when you're in the car, when you're at home, when you're listening it on your phone, many people listen Gnan at home when they go to sleep, or they take 5-10 minutes a day to listen to this Gnan. You know, the act of listening to the Gnan, because it is from the holy peers, becomes an act of ibadat. Becomes your ibadat. And ibadat in this sense is you are spiritually contemplating knowledge of the higher spiritual wisdom for the purpose of your salvation. You are making an effort. And in the act of that effort, the Gnans awakens your heart, and the light of the heart transmits itself into the light of your intellect. So the heart gets connected to your brain, if you like. I'm using the physical component. Now, the act of this awakening of the heart is fundamentally important. It is so important that I cannot overemphasize and underline this importance. Because remember, these are not just devotional songs. And remember, songs have the ability to provoke emotion in us and to provoke feeling in us. And these feelings and these emotions, when they are harmonized, they create a sense of awakening and a sense of realization. And we have many examples in our history how people in the past, in listening to verses of Gnan, it has created transformation to them. And this transformation happened as a result of the heart being awakened. And you know, one of the amazing Gnan that I have often quoted in this regard about awakening the heart is the first part of Saloko Moto by Holy Pir Shamsh. We will not recite the actual Gnan today, but we will recite it next week, because I would like to make a request that you make this Gnan your theme Gnan for the next 3 weeks, and I will consult the hosts and find out whether we can collectively recite this Gnan, and hopefully you can then have the connection as to what I'm saying. Now let me see if I can show you something, because I think this will hopefully make you put ourselves in the same page. So look, if you can see the screen, then this is that first verse I'm referring to. And because it is related to the heart, and I would like right at the outset to be able to say that this one part alone does create an amazing connection to the subject that I am delivering, and also to give you the connection physically, that look at the recitation of the Gnan. So this Gnan, Satgut Kehere, and look at the parts that are highlighted in red or orange, and it says, Dil mahe deval pujiye, ane dil mahe deve dua, dil mahe saiya ape vase, ane dil mahe ape dida. So look at the word dil mahe, dil mahe, dil mahe in all the verses. And the translation, you say, the Satguru says. Now remember here the word Satguru. This isn't just an ordinary title in our tariqah. This means the Holy Peer. This means the one who is the highest in creation. This means the one who has realized the highest degree of spiritual realization. And it is this being, the Holy Peer, that says, in the heart, worship the Lord. And the heart is the abode of the Lord. In the heart resides the Lord himself. In the heart, he, the Lord, gives didar. So take maybe a few seconds and try to understand this in the context that I have presented to you thus far, by saying to you that when you recite the Gnan, it is intended to awaken the sleeping heart. It is intended to awaken your heart. And if your heart gets awakened, all the magic that you expect in your lifetime begins to happen. And I will be covering that area down the road. But we need to set the foundation so you can put into perspective, why am I saying it as illuminated heart? And how are we going from the physical to the mystical? Remember at this point, and I will continue to make this emphasis and this remark, that it is fundamentally important always to remember, in all matters of religious practice, particularly in our tariqah, and particularly when it comes to implementing the principles of our tariqah, this is not simply a matter of logic and rational thinking, which is right here, but it is a matter of the heart. In other words, when you look at a Gnan like this one here, where the Holy Peer categorically says, in the heart worship the Lord, what do you think it means? It basically means, are you connecting your heart in the exercise of your ibadat and worship? The engagement of the heart, not the tongue, not the mouth, not just the mind, but the heart. Why? Because the heart is the abode of the Lord. Who are you worshiping? Ask yourself, who are you worshiping? What is the objective of your worship? When people say, I am thinking of my Mawla, good, you are thinking. What about the engagement of your heart? The Holy Peer says, in the heart, worship the Lord. The heart is the abode of the Lord. And then he reveals a secret here, that in the heart resides the Lord himself. Now, I will come to that point at some point, whereby we will talk about what does that mean, that in the heart resides the Lord himself. Remember one thing, the heart of every human being potentially, not necessarily actually, this is a very important point, potentially is the domain or the house of the Lord himself. Here the Pir says, in the heart resides the Lord himself. So we must put into perspective and say, is Mawla in my heart? If so, how? And if not, why not? And then this is for those individuals who always wonder about having this spiritual experience of the highest degree, and they say, where does that happen? Is it in my brain? Is it in my thinking and rational faculty? No. The Holy Pir says that experience is going to happen in the heart. Whatever you are searching for about the heart, the ultimate connection is going to happen in the heart. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, come back to a few things I want to say, and I'll show you more slides a little later. So I was saying to you that the heart is probably the most misperceived organ in the body. Now, I have mentioned some aspect of its spiritual capacity, but I want you to think even at the physical level, what are we looking at? Did you know, for example, every single day, your heart beats 100,000 times? What an amazing machine. 100,000 times this heart is beating every day. And in the span of a year, 3,600,000 times the heart is beating in the year. Year after year, year after year. In one single day, the heart pumps 70 gallons of blood in 1 hour. In 1 hour. Have you ever thought of that? What kind of power the heart even physically manifests itself? And if it pumps 70 gallons of blood in 1 hour, imagine how many gallons the heart pumps in 1 day. 1,680 gallons every single day. Do you know this is more gallons that you will ever put in your car as a fuel in the span of a whole year? And this is what the heart does in 1 day. Did you know in the womb of the mother, when the sperm fertilizes the egg, and when the time comes and we have the beginning of the embryonic development and journey, the first sign of life is the beating of the heart. Now, why am I telling you this? Not to give you biological metrics, but the idea behind this is to simply tell you there is something about the heart that we don't necessarily and openly realize. And it is this first sign of life, this beating of the heart that comes as a sign of life, that we need to begin to understand. And this first sign of life that comes in the womb of the mother has a spiritual meaning, a spiritual component. And somewhere down the road, I will explain a bit more, but at least let me tell you this information now so that you can put it into perspective later. So when this first sign of life manifests, this is actually, we call it Jiv. There are two things, Jiv and Atma, or we say Nafs and Ruh. They are the same correspondence. The Atma, or the spirit, or Ruh, comes later in the womb of the mother, not when there is the embryo. It will come in the fetal stage. But at the level of the embryo, now this is according to spiritual science, and we may take it, like I said, this is something which our Holy Peer teaches us. And of course, the notion of developmental biology in the womb of the mother is an amazing science in itself to understand. And you might perhaps remember, for those of you who have read parts of the Quran related to this, that the whole Quran itself, 1500 years ago, spoke about this developmental embryology in the womb of the mother. And I may have an opportunity down the road to bring it up, because I don't want that to dominate the thinking today, but I'm giving you today a kind of a bird's view, a kind of an overview of things that will come later in the next 2 lectures. So the point is, the physical manifestation of the heart beating is actually the presence of the nafs in the womb of the mother. And guess what? The question that everyone is asking, including scientists, exactly what is it that's guiding the development of this embryo to the point of becoming a fetus, and later on a full-fledged baby that will be born 9 months later to become the human being? It is the heart. The power that the heart has, and been given it through the nafs, is the one that guides the cellular development and everything else that we understand about this embryology in the womb of the mother. And I will come to some details, but I just want you to know the point so far is to say, look what happens at the beginning of human life, right there physically. And the question to ask, where did this jiv, this nafs, come from? Right at the time when conception took place and the first form of life manifested itself in the womb of the mother. And if we identify that as the beating of the heart, then surely prior to that, still, when the cell are fertilized and they become the zygote and then go on from there, we are wonderstruck to think, what is this miracle in the womb? And it all culminates where the heart takes the command of the whole process, and from there begins everything that we conceive about human life. So having said that, and as I said, I will have a lot more to say down the road, but having said that, let me move forward with what I would like to present today. Now please remember, this is work in progress. That means that we will come to a point about an hour from now, which we will have to stop because that will be the time that we need to stop. And then of course I will continue in the next 2 weeks. That's why we have 3 weeks of this. And if 1 more week is required, well, we will add it. But I consider this a fundamental area of our investigation about the whole notion about spiritual illumination and understanding of how the heart becomes the basis of that foundation. So now there is, to set the frame, there is an intellectual and there is a spiritual significance of the heart. Now, when I say intellectual, I'm including with that even the physical, and there is the intellectual, and there is, of course, the spiritual. And there is also an understanding of the heart from a much broader perspective, from the perspective of the spiritual sciences. And the perspective from the spiritual sciences is actually broken into three major components to study this aspect of the spiritual heart and what the heart actually represents intellectually and spiritually. There is what is known as the metaphysical perspective. There is what is known as the cosmological perspective, and there is what is known as the anthropological perspective. Now, the exercise of my presentation today is not to actually cover this three dimension, but I'll come back to it in just in a second. But what I do wish you to know as part of the ongoing conversation is that there is also an understanding of the heart on both, I've said, the metaphysical level, but also on what is known as the operative level. Or the operative level is actually the practical side of it, which is very important. Otherwise, we can be speaking about the philosophy of the heart in so many different layers and really not actually relate to it concretely. So there is when I say metaphysical, don't get confused. I mean spiritual, beyond the physical. That's what, in a literal sense, metaphysical actually means that, beyond physics or beyond the material. So there is the metaphysical, call it spiritual if you like, and there is the operative level, how the heart actually connects to the whole being of our operation. So based on the Quran, based on the teachings of the prophets, and I'm taking all the prophets put together, philosophers, mystics, sages, saints, intellectuals, all of them have developed in one shape or form a very profound and in-depth understanding of the heart. And they've done that into those three dimensions or layers I've told you. They have developed this understanding from a metaphysical perspective, from a cosmological perspective, and from an anthropological perspective. Now, I'm saying that because I am really motivated to tell you about all those layers, but this is not an academic lecture. This is a dialogue between myself and all of you collectively, and I'd like to keep it as a dialogue so that we don't get lost into those much deeper layers that we can express intellectually and we can express academically, if you like. We will leave that for another time, or maybe down the road, maybe we will touch in some dimension of this area. So these three dimensions are so important because in a way it gives the totality of understanding and expression. But maybe a word or two, when we say that there is the metaphysical dimension, of course I'm saying there is a spiritual dimension, to put it very simply. And remember, when we say when I'm using the word metaphysics, is not in the context of how Aristotle used into his metaphysics. I'm using the word metaphysics to mean a principle of divine origin. From the understanding of that principle of divine origin, what explanation do we have about the heart? That is the metaphysical aspect. And then we have the cosmological aspect. The cosmological aspect is that aspect that is related to both the spiritual and the material cosmos. And I will have something to say about it, if not today, next week. But basically, how does this spiritual cosmos, to put it simply, the spiritual world, and its many, many, many layers of dimension, and the material world and its many layers of dimension, how are they connected to the heart? It's cosmological dimension. And then there is the anthropological dimension. And I am referring to not the physical anthropology of the human being, which studies where did the human being come in from the perspective of evolutionary science, or from the science of evolutionary psychology and evolutionary biology. That is by itself an interesting area. How did the human being come to be where he is? But I am referring to a spiritual anthropology, which means it is that branch of knowledge that studies that the human being originates from a spiritual origin, because within the human being, Allah breathed His spirit in him. So there is something of a spiritual nature within the human being. And how is that spiritual nature connected to the heart? That is the anthropological aspect of it. So you can see there is a lot there, and I will, inshallah, with Mawla's mercy and blessing, I'll try my best to evolve this. But more importantly with all of this is to see how we can apply the magic of understanding what is the illuminated heart in the practice of our faith, in the practice of our tariqah. Just like the first Ginan I showed you that Pir Shams explained in that part of verse 1 of Sorokomoto. So, I mentioned a moment ago that these prophets, intellectuals, the mystics, the sages, and the saints, they have developed a very profound understanding about the heart. And these mystics and sages, they have also elaborated the operative method from the teachings of the Quran about various modes of prayers and the method and means to reach and penetrate the heart. The means and method to penetrate the heart. Now, other interpretations are there. That's why I mentioned this broadly, that those mystics, they belong to different interpretations. They have a different take on how they understand the heart. And remember, if they have used the Quran as a basis, and I will share some information just in a minute pertaining to us, so have our holy peers gone deep into the inner essence of the revelations, the collectivity of revelation, not just one, the collectivity of it, and they have given it to us in the forms of the Ginans. Not to mention how fundamentally deep our Imams have taught us about the inner mysteries and the inner mysticism of the heart. So the ability and the method or the means to actually reach and penetrate the heart is what is on the basis of these various studies that I mentioned. If you ask yourself a question right there at the beginning, that how many times does the Quran actually mention the heart? Have you thought about it? And let me tell you, the Quran mentions the heart over 130 times. 130 times is the references we find in the Holy Quran. And in the Quran, the word for heart that is used is qalb, Q-A-L-B, qalb. You have to say it with the throat, qalb. And the plural of that word is qulub. And I'm mentioning that for reference because in many other mystical literature, when you see this word, as I said before, it explains their own context, but we have our own context. So there are many traditions of Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that also refers to this central subject of the heart or the qalb. But before I go into it, let me point your attention. Imagine if there are 130 references that Allah has referred 130 times about the heart in the Quran. This notion of the heart has to be examined from the Quranic point of view. But 130 verses means 130 references, meaning 130 times. So think about it. It can be a very long exercise. And we'll see if we have the time to maybe select a few, but I'm trying to synthesize things together so it makes it easy for us to move forward. So when you look at within Islam, the mystical part of Islam that most people refer to it as Sufism, and this is perhaps the one time I bring Sufism into my lectures because I'm trying to make the connection to you that from a spiritual and historical point of view, all these Sufi paths, both the Shia Sufi paths and within Sunnism there are Sufi paths, all of these paths, they all relate to Maulana Hazrat Ali sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Hazrat Ali is recognized by all these Sufi paths to be the supreme master and teacher and illuminator of knowledge of the heart. And therefore, in all these Sufi paths, they mention the heart, most of them I should say, and as a result, their writing makes reference to these, we say, matters pertaining to the heart. Okay, so because many people read some Sufi literature, and among them, by the way, I'm isolating the teachings of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. I'm isolating the teaching of Shams Tabriz, his spiritual master, who was the son of Imam Alauddin Muhammad. I'm isolating the teachings of Ibn Arabi. And I'm just giving 3 examples right now. There are other mystics, and who have, like Bayazid Bastami, Rabia, and others, which I may mention them down the road. But the first 3, I'm mentioning it because they have been identified by the Imam in the context of their explanation is in harmony with the inner essence of our own teachings. Now remember, the son of Imam Alauddin Muhammad, that was Shams Tabriz, he was the spiritual master of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, and Jalaluddin Rumi wrote the Masnavi. And there are amazing secrets that Rumi has given in the Masnavi about the heart, which basically, in the context of Rumi and that of Shams Tabriz and other mystics like Hafiz and others, there is the notion about the ecstasy of the mystic, the ecstasy of the heart, which will probably come way down the road in my 3rd lecture. So for now, as I said, I'm giving you the span. And remember, if a certain intellectual and a certain mystic like Jalaluddin Rumi, a mystic of the highest order, is able to express the essence of Ismaili Satpant into his Masnavi, do not forget that the Masnavi is considered by many Muslims and many mystics that Rumi translated, not literally or verbally, the whole of the Quran as his composition of the Masnavi. So the Masnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi is in fact the Quran in the Persian language. And from the Quran, he has extrapolated amazing facts and figures, to just use an expression, into the didactic meaning, into narratives, into stories, into mystical experiences, how he reveals them through symbols, and so on and so forth. And I would love down the road, inshallah, with Mawla's blessing, I will try to select certain aspects of Rumi's teachings and connect them to our own practice. As you have seen, many times Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam had done that. And he mentions Rumi, he mentions Hafiz, he mentions Shams Tabriz. So, having said that, matters pertaining to the heart, which, as I said, many mystics and many others have come forward to write about. So you will find into this literature of these mystics and Sufis and others that they use other words related to the heart. And that's important because even in the Ginans, many of these words are reflected and used. And especially when you look at the, as I say, mystical literature, these words should be familiar to us so we can identify what's being said. So I've already mentioned the word qalb, Q-A-L-B, that is used in the Quran, and that is, of course, the Arabic. There are other words also used, like fu'ad. There is the word seer. Now, fu'ad is spelled F-U'-A-D, and then seer, S-I-R-R, and then lub, L-U-B-B, and then in Persian, the word dil, the one that Pir Shams mentioned. Dil mahe deval pujiye. The word dil is one of the words for that, and that is the Persian word. Now, let us just look at this word, because remember, words that I use, and because it is the Quran and therefore it's a divine revelation. So words that are used by the divine have internal meaning that gives us a sense of where this thing is and how we can try to understand some of the layers. So if you look at the Quran itself, as I said, the word for heart is qalb, Q-A-L-B. And this word qalb, from its root word QLB, this term means change and transformation. How about that? The word heart in Arabic, qalb, from its root meaning, the root is the QLB, qalb. From that root in the language means change and transformation. Now, I hope you will remember this because this is so fundamental. Remember, in the beginning I said to you, we have to awaken the sleeping heart. And Jinan is one of the powerful meanings, powerful methods, powerful means to bring the heart to the level of light. But in that is encompassed the blessings and the magic that the Imam gives about it. So this notion of qalb is actually, or heart, is change and transformation. Now, why is that important? Because one of the names, one of the attributes of the Nur, one of the attributes of Allah's Nur is actually Mukallib al-Qulub. You know, I mentioned to you the singular is qalb before, and the word Qulub is plural. Mukallib al-Qulub, meaning, what does that mean? It means the transformer of hearts. Now, down the road, I will piece everything together, but right now and today, it's important that you don't forget these meanings, because remember, we are speaking about something that is not in your sight, but something that we often relate in different ways. To give you an example or two, that when someone calls your name, you can either raise your hand, or what would you do? You point to yourself, you say, that's me, that's me. You know, you point your finger to yourself, but where do you point it? You don't say, this is me. You point to your heart. And there is a reason why we naturally point ourselves. We point ourselves to the heart. We identify ourselves to the heart. And even in certain countries, when there is the patriotic national anthem, people keep their hands right here on the heart. Very important to know why that is. It's a gesture human being does. And if you think about it for 30 seconds, that why is it we don't identify ourselves in some other way? We can say, well, here, that is me. Look at my face. No, we say, no, I'm here. That's me. So there is some kind of mystique about our movements that takes us into that place. And that is an aspect I will describe in a second. So to give you an example from Ibn Arabi that I mentioned, that is one of the greatest Islamic mystics. And I will tell you that he wasn't just a great Islamic mystic by title. He had a title that was given to him by other intellectuals of the time, and they called him Tawassul al-Ulama, meaning the peacock of the learned. Amazing title. And Ibn Arabi, he wrote many mystical texts that is worthy of study. They are not easy texts, but they are worthy of study. I will, in my own way, at some point or the other, bring many elements to make this connection. So what this Ibn Arabi says, he uses the word takalub, derived from the same root as qalb, the word that I mentioned. It was the word heart in the Quran. And what did he mean by that? What he meant by that was the constant transformative power that is inherent, that is in the heart. The constant transformative power. So this notion of transformation is somewhat very central to how the heart is speaking to us to reveal its mystical spiritual secrets. And it is a power of the heart which brings about integration. You know what I mean by integration? Bringing things together as a whole, being holistic, but not in a passive way, in a very dynamic way, meaning a living way. It does that in a way where we can actually experience it. That's what is meant by a dynamic mode of that form of continuous and constant transformation. So coming back to the root of the word, now remember, I'm expanding the meaning so that it will be rooted into this principle of why this word is used in the Quran by the divine. Allah says the word heart, qalb. So coming back to this word, the root of qalb, which is, as I've mentioned, qalba, QLB, it also means, besides change and transformation that I've mentioned, it also means to turn upside down. Turn upside down. You might say, okay, what did Allah mean by that? Why does the Quran mention this word, qalb? And on the one hand, it means transformation, change and transformation. Why? Because this is one of Allah's attribute, Muqallib al-Qulub, that is the transformer of the heart. But this word also actually means to turn upside down. Now, the heart in the physical body, from the physical point of view, in a sense, it's suspended upside down. Let me share my screen with you. I can show you some pictures. So that was, first of all, the Ginan. That was the meaning. And this was simply to elaborate to you that these various colors that you see are representative of the heart's symbolically representative of the various layers that exist spiritually from the heart. But essentially, this is the outer heart, if you like. And then we have, if you like, the middle heart. And then we have the inner heart. See, there are three dimensions to these. And again, this is just simply to mention to you what it is, but to bear in mind that the heart isn't just that one thing, it's more than that. And we will, inshallah, have the opportunity to describe more in detail something. But look, when I mentioned that the root of the word, the other root of the word qalb, QLB, also means to turn upside down. In the normal manner, we normally see the heart the other way around, right? When we have the heart that we express on the day of Valentine's Day, or the lovers' exchange of a symbolic message. Actually, the heart is like this, suspended upside down, and symbolically, geometrically, in the context of sacred geometry, the heart is expressed as an upside down triangle. And you can see these various layers correspond to these layers, although this is the heart that we see on Valentine's Day. I'm just using that way, or the lover's heart. But the heart is actually like this. And look at that. This is the actual picture, an X-ray of the heart, the human heart. And do you see? The heart is not actually exactly on the left side of the chest. I hope you can see my cursor. It is somewhat in the middle of the chest for a very spiritual reason, which I'll come to it just in a second. And look at the way the heart is suspended. It's not the that one there, which the point is in the bottom. The point where these two curves come about is suspended upside down. And this is exactly what you see. The heart is actually upside down. It points upwards. So, qalaba, that root, is also the root of kalab, which means a mold. You know, when you have a mold, you take a mold and you put some plasticine or sand or plaster, and then it becomes something. But this word also means a mold, which means that which holds together the inner reality of man. I hope you're following me. I know this is a bit technical, but it's not impossible to understand why we are saying why this heart aspect is so important. So you see, we have first of all the notion of the heart as change and transformation. Then we have the notion of the heart as from its root meaning, that is to turn upside down. And we have also from the same root the idea that it means a mold, meaning that which holds together, that keeps together, not separate. Everything is held together. And it holds together what? The inner reality. The inner reality. So, let me stop sharing my screen. Having said that, where do we go? If the context has been clear so far, and you understand these intricacies, then we are in a position now to go to the phase whereby we can analyze these concepts and see the reality of it in our physical and spiritual life. So, as mentioned earlier, there is a metaphysical, a spiritual, and there is an operative understanding, an operative level of the heart. You understand the word operation. It's one thing to say something spiritual about the heart. It's another thing to say, how is that spiritual element related to the practice in the operation of what we do in terms of how we use prayers and we use other means to penetrate the inner meaning and the inner reality of the heart. So what can we say? What can we say about the heart? To begin with, the heart, and I'll bring back this picture because I think it might be making good sense to show it here again. And I will just leave this picture for a minute. And as I describe to you the few elements, I want you to think about it in that manner. Okay? So connect yourself not only to the picture, but connect your own thinking with your own heart inside yourself. Okay? And if you like, you can put your hand there and feel the pulsation of your heart. So what can we say about the heart? So to begin with, we know for sure, as I've explained a moment ago, the heart is the center of the human universe. Okay? We call it the human microcosm. The heart, I repeat this and I will repeat it a few times, the heart is the center of the human microcosm. Remember when we say microcosm, we say the inner universe and there is the outer universe. Now the outer universe, you can see it with your eyes, beginning with the sun and the moon and the planets and the galaxies and all other things out there. How about the inner universe? Well, the inner universe, the center of that inner universe is where the heart is actually positioned. That's why we say the heart is the center. It is the center. Just you have a circle, it is the center of the human microcosm. And it is also the center of the human body. You can see it from here. If we symbolize, if we look at the whole human body, this will be the center of the human body. Now, do you see why? For a reason, why our gestures and our identity is driven by the fact that we touch our chest to say, yeah, this is me. Or when you have to say something, you will say, I am so-and-so, or I do this, or I do, we touch our chest. It is the center of the human physical body. The heart is also the center of the vital energies. And the levels of energy that the human heart achieves is completely and totally different than all other forms of energy that is experienced by the subtle bodies of our being and of course the physical heart. The it is also the center of emotions. Where do we experience our emotions? Right there, it is the center of emotions. And the heart is also the center of the soul. It is also the center of the soul. Remember what I said to you in just a while back, when the fertilization of the sperm with the ovum takes place, and the first sign of life evolves from there. You find that first beating of the heart, the symbolism behind that is just this, that it is the center of the soul, that the heart is just the manifestation of that movement. And then, spiritually speaking, the heart, metaphysically speaking, spiritually speaking, it is the meeting place. It is the meeting place of the human and the celestial realm, the spiritual. So the human realm and the spiritual realm meet where the heart exists. And why? Because that is where the spirit resides. Meaning the Ruh, the Atma. That is where the spirit resides. And when the Quran says, Al-Ruh min Amra Rabbi, Allah says in the Quran, the spirit is by the command of my Lord. Meaning that part of our being that we call, we interchange this word, Ruh, spirit and soul. So I just use the word soul. We are used to the word soul, but actually spirit or Atma, or in Arabic, Ruh, because the verse says, Al-Ruh min Amra Rabbi. Imagine this. If the spirit is located right where the heart is, remember what is the spirit? That is the spark that is part of the universal flame that Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says. In other words, that spark exists right there at the center of our being. And now you can see why Holy Pir Shams says, Dil mahe deval pujiye, because it is in the center of the heart. And I will have more to say about it when we come back to this Gina next week. So just to recap a little bit, metaphysically speaking, it is the meeting place. The heart is the meeting place between the human and the celestial realms or world. So the terrestrial and the celestial, they come together. How do they come together? You might say, but one is spiritual and one is material. So how do they come together? How do they come together? I'll stop sharing my screen. So you say, how do they come together? Because this is the big confusion people have about the connection between the material and the spiritual. And because they don't realize the value of this connection and the means of this connection, then what do? They disregard matters related to the heart of the spiritual level, and they are more connected to the material, to the human physical level. And that connection is stronger because of our physical being. And I said in the beginning that the heart is probably the most misperceived organ, in that sense that we don't regard the importance of the heart in that sense of the term. So the human and the celestial come together at the level of the heart. Is it not amazing to you? Is it not amazing to you that this physical heart, that physically the heart seems small, but this is the most mysterious center. The most mysterious center is not the brain, it's not the mind, it is the heart. And if you have followed that Kinan of Pir Shams, as I mentioned a moment ago, then you can see that this is exactly where the Holy Pir, in those 4 or 5 lines, discloses the whole secret of how the heart enacts itself when it is awakened. So, just to continue a bit further, that let me bring to our knowledge something the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said. The Holy Prophet said, and this is so important, so important. I'm giving you the prophetic teachings first, and then you'll see how our beloved Imams have taught us this reality. The Holy Prophet said that it is the throne, al-arsh, the word arsh is used. It is the throne of God, the throne of the merciful, al-Rahman. It is the throne that encompasses the whole universe. Really? Is that a possibility? Think about this teaching of the Holy Prophet. If you go back to that picture, and I'm keen that you should make that connection in the hope that you do make that connection. Is this the whole universe? Is this the throne? The Holy Prophet said, it is the throne of God. Now, what is the throne? The throne is where God sits and lives. Is this not what Pir Shams said in the Ginan? If you take the Ginan, well, it is right there. If I can just show it to you again. Yeah. In the heart, worship the Lord. The heart is the abode of the Lord. The heart resides the Lord. And the Holy Prophet says, the throne, al-Arsh, the throne of God, the throne of the All-Merciful, the one who is Al-Rahman, Al-Rahim, it is the throne that encompasses the whole universe. Are you with me into this understanding and this teaching? That this area of the human being that we call where the heart resides, which is where the celestial and the terrestrial or the human level comes together, that is considered where the spirit exists. Obviously, you would come to that conclusion that this is where, which is the center of where the spirit resides. Obviously, it has to be the place whereby not only God lives, but it is actually it encompasses the whole universe. That's why the Holy Prophet said, you know what did he say? He said, the Holy Prophet says, God told him. What did he say? God said to him, my heaven contain me not, nor my earth, but the heart of my faithful servants doth contain me. Now, make the connection with the Ginan again. I hope in this particular phase of my presentation, I'm trying to very heavily emphasize that look at the teachings in the Ginan in its beauty and sacredness of how these elements are brought together and how it is meant to awaken us. So everything that I said to you about the heart relates to how our holy peers tells us about the Ginan. The notion of transformation and change, the notion of the heart being upside down, the notion of the fact that it contains the totality of our inner reality. It is where the center of the spirit is. It is where the spirit actually exists. It is the part of our inner universe. And it is where it is what is called Arsh al-Azim, the throne the magnificent throne of God. It is the throne of God. And as I've just mentioned, what the Holy Prophet says. Now, I know it's 9:25, and I'll go on for a few more minutes, and then we can speak about just a couple of more concepts, because I think at this stage I have laid enough foundation to take us to the following lectures. So perhaps the last point I'd like to make, among others, is in speaking about the throne of God. In our holy Ginans, I have already demonstrated that, but also in the teachings of the Holy Imam. What does the Imam says? What mysteries does the Imam reveal to us and teach us about the throne of God? Our beloved Imam teaches us that the pure, loving, and clean hearts, which contains, now this is the operative level, by the way, okay? This is the operative, an example of the operative level. So you can connect it already to the things that I've said, that the pure, loving, and clean hearts, which contain no malice and enmity to anyone, or lust for things of this world. Such hearts are the throne of the merciful. Such hearts are the throne of the merciful. And remember these qualities, because if you forget these qualities, then you will fall into a different category. So just repeat them for the sake of clarity, and for the sake of ensuring we're on the same page, because I'm going to make some comments about it in a second. The loving and clean hearts, which contain no malice and enmity to anyone, or lust for things of this world. Such hearts are the throne of the merciful and the seat of angels. Imagine this. This area, you can see my cursor. It is the throne of the merciful, and it is also the seat of angels. Therefore, the Imams have taught us, and they say to the Mu'mins, they say to the faithful, they say to the believers, he says, "O believers, see God in your own hearts. See God in your own hearts, keeping your heart well polished. See God in your own heart and keep your heart well polished, removing rust, dust, doubt, and hypocrisy." These are such important elements in ethics. Again, removing rust, dust, doubt, hypocrisy from the mirror of your heart by the brush of firm faith, yaqeen. The brush of firm faith, it's a brush that will clean the mirror of the heart. So the Imam further teaches us, and he says, wash it, wash that heart with the religious knowledge, with your understanding of your religion. And then he says, if you love God, our beloved Imam says, turn away your heart from evil-minded people, so that they do not make you similar to themselves. Because remember, corruption is easy to catch. If you have evil-minded people, what can they do? They can change your heart. Remember the notion of change? I haven't spoken about it in great detail, but this is what the Imam is alluding to. Stay away from such people. Then, what does the Imam teaches? He says, God has turned his face from these evil-minded people who do not recognize the truth and have lost touch with the Imam of the time. So those who have the misfortune to lose this connection with the Imam, they are excluded from this formula. And you can see at this, on this basis, that means at this operative level of the heart, how this connects to the practice of our faith. Now, I think I'm going to formally stop here today and basically come to a stop about the lecture itself, because if I begin my next phase, which actually I'm very tempted to do, it is going to take us at least another 45 minutes to an hour, and I don't think that will be rendering service to you right now. So it's better that we, from what I've said so far, basically keep that as a basis, as a foundation, and next week, inshallah, we will continue with more of it and get into the deeper layer of the notion of the heart. But as I mentioned at the operative level, I will heavily explain the scientific discoveries we have made, how the heart relates to the whole structure of our mind and thinking and brain, because that is an important part of our practice in the spirit. But today, right now, it's like midnight in the East Coast, and in other parts of the world is way past early morning. And for those in this part of the world, we are like 9:30. So Shairoz, if I may, back to you, and the helm is in your hand.
Thank you so much, Dr. H. What a fascinating topic. Looking forward for the next two series. If I may also invite Sharon to join me on screen. Thank you, Sharon. We will be beginning the Q&A portion of this soon. I don't know if there's anything you want to say finally, Dr. H, before we move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shairoz, for that. I'm going to take the opportunity on behalf of the almost 300 people that we have joined tonight to thank Dr. H for all of that wisdom. Some prayers. May Mola accept your seva, Amen. Your time, the Amen. Knowledge that you have shared with all of us.
Amen.
May he accept your dedication and service for helping Amen. Us raise Amen. Our vibration and frequency.
Amen.
Dr. H. I will allow you to share a few words and offer some prayers.
May Mola Bapa, out of his love and compassion, grace and mercy, keep our heart awakened and alive. May Mola Bapa guide our heart to spiritual illumination and spiritual realization. May Mola Bapa open our heart to his Noor. May his Noor guide us, protect us, keep us safe. May Mola Bapa's hand be upon all of us to keep us safe every breath, every step in all that we do. May Mola Bapa bless us with barakat. May Mola Bapa bless us with abundance, fulfillment of all our wishes. May Mola Bapa remove all calamities, difficulties, obstacles in the path of our spiritual enlightenment and development. May Mola Bapa reward you enormously for your dedication in seeking and taking the time to learn about your faith, whether it is from this side or many other side, and many other speakers who are contributing to the enlightenment of the Jamaat. May all of them also be blessed with barakat, with knowledge, with guidance, and may they continue their wonderful work that they have been doing. And may Mola Bapa bless everyone with Zahiri Batini Didar. Amin.
Amin. This will be an exit point for anybody that wishes to exit at this time before we start the Q&A. The chat is open for anybody that would like to ask questions. You can also use the raise hand icon if you would like to ask a question on camera. So without further ado, Dr. H, we have our first few questions. First question asked by Shiraz is, Dr. H, can you identify on a daily basis what we can do operationally to keep our heart and mind clean?
So glad this question has been asked, because this is one of the points I wanted to mention. Our beloved Imams, multiple times, in many places, has always said to us, keep a clean heart and a pure soul. The notion of keeping a clean heart, the Imam has also defined that, because it is a part of the ethics of our faith. And these other elements I mentioned earlier on, not to have doubt, malice, not to have any ill will, not to have grudges and this and that in our heart, is very important, extremely important, to keep our heart clean. Now, you know, the notion of cleanliness of the heart, the question which Shiraz has asked, is one that is of a highly spiritual nature. And that is, remember what I said a moment ago, that one of the roots of the word kalb, which is the kalb, from that root, it is the mold, that which holds our inner reality together. In order for the heart to remain wholesome and functional and operational at that level, the first and foremost is the recognition of the Imam of the time. And I don't mean recognition just on his physical side or historical side or the side which is quote unquote non-spiritual, so to speak. Recognize the holy Imam, who he is. And without going much further, simply to say, remember, he is Allah's Noor. And when the individual, out of his understanding and conviction, says, I am attaching, not detaching, which is the opposite. I am attaching my heart to my Mawla. And my life will not function without that attachment. You will be blessed with the ability to keep your heart clean and wholesome. But when there is detachment, the heart begins to integrate itself. Well, I should use the opposite word, disintegrate itself to the level of the nafs, which I will cover that next week in a little bit more detail. Simply put, you want Mawla Bapa to be proud of you, then keep your heart clean and your soul pure. Your pure heart, clean heart, pure soul, clean soul. And you know, this is an act of intelligence. It's an act of the intellect. You know, Mawla Bapa said, the use of the intellect is the proper behavior in society. So don't forget that. Every moment of your life, understand that this is what is at stake. Don't blame other people. Don't say he did that to me, she did that to me, and point a finger to other people. Don't. Whatever it is there. You take responsibility. Take responsibility. And people who have the habit of simply going outside themselves to point are misguided. So think about it in this context. Thank you for that question. I have some good example to give. I may give it next week.
Thank you, Dr. H. I invite Shenaz, she has her hand up, to unmute and to ask her question.
Yes, Yali Madad, it's Zul actually, so instead of Shenaz, I'm using a computer. Two comments. One, Allah resides in the heart of only those whom wills or he chooses. Then second, when you talk about change and transformation, what change and transformation are you referring to? Is it the different levels of change in our spiritual realm? And is that change our final destination, the salvation that you're talking about? And when the heart stops beating, at that point in time, the change is at a specific point in time of the spiritual realm.
Yes.
Am I correct to understand that?
Yes, you are. And these are extremely important questions related to the operative level of the heart when it comes to the change and transformation. Because remember that in the heart is where the human being identifies his identity. This is not the exercise of the brain to say, am I a good person or a bad person? The idea that comes from within the heart gives you your, if you like, your identity. So if you want to know how good you are, how bad you are, and why is it the good and the bad, then your heart will tell you. You know, often people say, look into your heart. Give a chance to penetrate your heart and look what's coming out of it. Immediately you will get a response. And this is one of the things, as I mentioned, that, you know, we need to understand more concretely the conversation that the heart is having with your brain. And this conversation says a lot of things. So there is this conversation at the physical, material, operational level, and there is this conversation at the spiritual level. And when this conversation takes place at the spiritual level, there are layers of this conversation in different ways, and those layers leads to transformations. And what we mean by transformation is the amount of light that comes into the heart and how the heart pumps the energy of that light throughout your being, which, as I said, inshallah, I will cover hopefully more in detail next week and the week after. Thank you for your question, Zoe.
Dr. H, we have a couple questions, 3 particularly, so we'll try getting to as many as we can. One question which was interesting was, what happens when a heart is transplanted into another human being? Is there...
Yes, it's a very good question. Now remember, the transplantation process is actually a physical medical process, meaning you are talking about that piece of flesh. And I know why that question comes, because people feel that what I've said so far is kind of directly related to that piece of flesh. It is and it isn't, in a sense that if I say to you, let me just explain this. If I say to you that, who are you? And you'll say, oh, I'm so-and-so, and you may show a picture, or you can go into a mirror and look at yourself and say, well, this is me. But is that what I mean? This is you physically. But the real you, with a capital Y, it's not this physical. This physical is the outer aspect of who you are inside, meaning your soul, your spirit. The real you is your soul. In the same way, when I speak about the heart, yes, the physical heart, that piece of flesh, can get transplanted, but it doesn't change the nature of who you are inside of you, which is the real you. So the spiritual matters are related to the spiritual you. The physical matters are related to your physical heart. Now, there are studies that I have seen about how sometimes this transplantation of the heart has sometimes brought, if you like, a new layer upon the physical character of human beings who've had transplantation of the heart. And the same thing happened when sometimes blood from a third party is transfused into a person. So there are those things, but simply to remember, it doesn't change the essence of what I've said. The physical heart is a vehicle, and the real you can express itself through any of these vehicles as long as those vehicles are wholesome, meaning the heart you got was an organ that continues to keep you alive.
Thank you for that clarification. Another question that we have is from Kareem. He says, does this also relate to the hearts in the animal kingdom?
Now remember, there is a difference between the notion of the heart in the animal kingdom and the human kingdom. Animals are instinctually guided by a divine force that guides them. And animals do not rebel against their own nature. Animals remain faithful to their own well-being in every shape and form. And animals basically act on the basis of that divine impulse that is in them. Although they are into an animal body, they represent a different species in the animal kingdom. But the point is that all these creatures, they manifest a divine impulse, which basically is an impulse that allows them to live their lives in the form that they are. The human being is the only one who can rebel against this divine impulse and who can misuse his free will by saying, I don't want to do this. No, I will not follow the command of God. I don't believe in God. I don't think God exists. I don't think it's possible to know God. So people who have detached themselves from their own inner reality, in other words, the human being in particular, and only the human being can do that, then that is a major difference, because a human being has the ability to make a choice between the right and the wrong through the use of his intellect, reason, logic, rationality, and so on. That's why it's so important for the human reason and rational capacity to be well informed, without which, if it was wrongly informed, it would necessarily make wrong logical decisions. That's why even the propositions of logic have to be connected to the notion of the spirit. And in the end of the day, remember, Allah guides to his light whom he pleases. So let us be into that bucket, if you like, because that is where we realize who we are. And in the animal kingdom, they don't have the intellect as developed by us. Remember what our beloved Imam taught us? That the man is Allah's greatest creation. And what makes him greatest? The intellect, nothing else. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Dr. H. The next question we have is a two-part question. How does Niyaz and Chanta help the heart, and is there a concept of a black heart?
So I'll take the latter part first. To put it simply, when an individual does na-farmani, meaning that you know what the Imam has guided us with. It is a farman of Hazar Imam. And when you willfully, deliberately misuse that ability of your choice by ignoring the farman, in the context whereby you have chosen a path opposite to the Farman. That is a manifestation of what could lead to a black heart. And there are Farmans which Imams have made, which I urge you to read. They are into the book of precious gems. And in there, in some of the countries where Imam have, when he went, he mentioned about the notion of these black hearts, and a few other places also. So one has to be very understanding and mature to know that definitely that concept is there, and anything that is opposing the guidance of the Imam becomes a black heart. Let me put it to you into another way. Whatever Mola Bapa is teaching us and telling us to do, that is light. It's light because it's coming from his Nur, not anything else. So let's assume for a moment a person ignores the light. What is left? If there is no light, it will be darkness. Call it black. That's how the heart enters into a phase of this blackness. And it's a very sensitive question and a very important question because it reflects the notion of the operation of the heart. Now, the first question, forgive me, Sharon, can you remind me?
Sure. It's how does niyaz and chanta help the heart?
Again, I'm going to answer generally because I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of specific practices, but the answer is there. Remember, everything we do in our tariqah is intended for the salvation of our soul, and it is intended for the hereafter. A little bit for this world, but a lot more for the hereafter. Because Mola Bapa tells us the soul is the only part of the human being that is eternal. And therefore, the whole focus is always on the eternity of the soul. Having said that, when we practice our faith in Jamaat Khana, either through chanta and niyaz and so on, it is exactly that. It is intended for the purification of our whole being, body, mind, and spirit in totality. And it is that purification which gradually and slowly, if we do it in the right way, right understanding, conviction, and understanding where this grace and mercy comes from, then the transformation happens. And this purification removes darkness and brings light into the heart.
Ameen. Thank you for that. We have a question from Ali S. If you can unmute and ask your question.
Yali Madad, sir, how are you, sir?
Alhamdulillah, shukr Mawla.
Sir, first of all, I have to say thank you so much for such an inspiring lecture, which helps us move from form to essence, and I would say that from periphery to center to get the transformed heart. Sir, I was just listening to your lecture yesterday in which you were referring to one of the Ginans, Sakhi Mahapat Keri, in which you said that Peer says that our soul has 5 coverings, right? Anamaya Kosh, Pranamaya Kosh, Manamaya Kosh, Vignanmaya Kosh, and Anandmaya Kosh. Yes. So then my question is how the process of transforming our heart goes on in the light of shedding off the 5 coverings of the soul, and how this transforming process help us to move from physical to astral to lower mental body or to higher mental body, and then body closes to the soul. And if this 5 covering sheds off, then we are able to just go to the spiritual felicity or whatever. And my second question is, can we say that, like for example, as you said that that we have three layers. 3 layers of heart. So can these 3 layers of heart represent the physical, astral, and the causal world, which you were talking about in your lecture, and which I was listening? And sir, one more comment, like, sir, I'm so much thankful to you that Maulana Hazri Imam always says that in Baitul Khyal's Farman, that you will see the light of Hazrat Ali in your heart. And Imam always emphasizes not to use your tongue while you recite the bowl. It should be coming from the heart. Sir, thank you so much for helping us move in our journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
And sir, I want to say that we are just a dust, not even a dust under the feet of Mominins like you, sir.
Oh.
I must.
I'm humbled by your comments. It is Maula's grace and mercy. Now look, I will answer your question briefly, because they are very, very important questions, but I hope along the course of these lectures down the road we can address them. So in this Ginan Sakhi Mahapat Karivat, the holy peers, the focus of the Ginan is that I'm trying to answer your question very directly, because I don't want to get into the details, but the focus of the Ginan is, the holy peer says that do not misidentify yourself. Let me explain. You see, we are in our physical body. And this physical body, in the context of the Ginan, is called Annamaya Kosh. Now, if I say I am the physical body, means I am identifying myself as the physical body. That's a misidentification, because one day this body will die and I will realize I never was the physical body. And then the Holy Peer goes further and says that you are not even the subtle body. Now, what is a subtle body? The subtle body is the combination of the next 3 layers, the Pranamaya Kosh, Manamaya Kosh, and Vijnanmaya Kosh. Those 3 layers make up the subtle body. Some people call it the astral body. And if a person was to identify and say, well, here I am out of the physical realm, I now exist into the astral realm, and I have my astral body. Misidentification again. You are not your astral body. Because remember, in the physical world, and I'm speaking extremely generally, in the physical world, a person may live 80, 90, 100, if they're lucky, maybe a little more than 100 years. But in the astral realm, you can actually exist for tens of thousands of years until your astral body itself decomposes to go either lower or higher. And so the Holy Peer says, no, you are not Pranamaya Kosh, you are not Manamaya Kosh, and you are not Vijnanmaya Kosh. You are not those 3 layers, which is your next body, your subtle body. And then the Holy Peer goes further and says, you are not even Anandmaya Kosh. That is your causal body. So that is the 3rd body. And because the 3rd body is closest to the Atma, to the soul, it reflects and absorbs more of that spiritual light, and it has a better experience of the notion of bliss, if you like. That's why that body, that covering, is called Anand Maya Kosh. But the Holy Peer says, no. Even that is not your actual reality. That is also a misidentification. Because if someone decided to live in the causal world using their causal body, they can live for many millions of years. And I'm giving this number relative to our earthly understanding. And a person can easily get misidentified, because when you reach the causal level, the experience of that bliss is so incredibly good. you will think that you've made it, but you haven't made it. It's another misidentification. So the Pir says in that Ginan, the Holy Pir says that you have to get out of these layers or the three bodies and go to the level of Mahapat. That's why this Ginan is called Saki Mahapat Kerivat Koik Koik Janere. The Pir says very, very, very few people at all knows about this Mahapat. Now, I'm just going to conclude here by giving you the punchline. So those who are fortunate to go to Mola Bapa and tell Mola Bapa, show me the path. What Mola Bapa does to us in our practice, he takes us to that Mahapat. And that is where the connection to the highest level is. That's why in our practice, we don't really care about the physical body. We don't care about the subtle body. We don't even care about the causal body. You know why? We don't have the time. You don't have, 80, 90, 100, 1,000 years to go through these layers. What Mola Bapa does, out of his grace and mercy, he's going to short circuit the process. And Mola Bapa says, I'm going to show you a path that will take you to Mahapat. I can't say much more than that because it relates to something that we cannot liberally say because it's not a liberal thing. But I hope you understand, and I hope I haven't left you in the lurch.
Thank you for that, Dr. H. I actually think we are at our time. It's 10 o'clock, so I think we did well. I did want to share this quote I heard Dr. H. It relates to today's lecture. It says, "It has been said that the longest journey one can take is from the head to the heart." So thank you for allowing us to be a part of this tonight with you. And even within the heart, the different dimensions. So we're excited for the next two series. Again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email us and also feel free to reach out to us for being added to our email list. Any last words, Dr. H?
I'd like to thank Shairoz and you, Sharon, and I know the other hosts and co-hosts are behind the scene, and they've been very active in, inshallah, keeping the whole process going. And as I've said before, your collective dedication is what makes these lectures possible. Not just hosting these lectures on this particular day, but the background work that all of you collectively do to bring this information together and to allow the development of the topic, its title, its meanings, and the discussions that you have, the feedback that all of you collectively give me really is a source of my strength and inspiration. And Mawla bless you all for this amazing seva that you're doing. And I want the participant in their prayers to remember you all also in every way. So Mawla's grace, mercy, and blessing may permeate every moment of your lives for your selfless dedication and selfless seva that you're offering. Not only here, some of you offer elsewhere. Sometimes it's not even visible. And may that also be considered with Mawla's blessing and earn your benefits spiritually and materially. So thank you, Shairoz. Thank you, Sharon, for taking place of this thing. And we look forward to the participant for this particular phase next week, or maybe next Monday if they are there.
Amen. Thank you, Shairoz. Thank you, Dr. H. We wish everyone a good night, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yali Madad.